Yeah, greetings, family, and welcome back to another one of our Pan-African Congress Movement TV special. And today is a very special one because today we'll be having Dada Verona from Ancestral Voices. And today I'm hoping that a lot of you have come across Ancestral Voices, which I'm sure some of you have, and those who hasn't, you're definitely in for a treat. So as usual, before we go into the main body of the program, we'll pass over to Ndugu Mani, who will now change the energy for us. So Ndugu Mani.
Asante sana. And so, Hamjambo Jama, which basically means greetings, kindred. Thank you again for joining us, and I'm happy to do the opening ritual for the emoji session. So I will share my screen. Let's see. Okay, so Ndugu, that should be ready to be uploaded. Yep. Okay, wonderful.
Oh, no.
So, yes, so my name is Imani Nassor. I'm a member of Pan-African Congress Movement, and I'll be taking us through this ritual we call Mabadiliko ya Nishati, change of energy in Kiswahili. We use Kiswahili because at the 6th Pan-African Congress, it was felt that when there is an United States of Africa or United Great African Republic of Africa, that the lingua franca, the language of education and commerce, should be Kiswahili, because that's one of the most spoken languages across the continent. So we use this particular ritual, particularly now in this particular time where we're dealing with the disease, where we can't be in front of each other or share each other's spirit and energy, personally, face to face. So we use this ritual so that we can join and resonate with each other in cyberspace. As we are all energy of the all, we can connect with each other wherever we are across the world. So what we're going to do is to start the ritual is to get ourselves into the right frame of mind and the right frame of spirit. And that we're going to use that is by using our breath, because our breath is the link between our physical entities and our spirit and the spiritual essence of ourselves and the spiritual realm. And so to do that, we're going to just breathe together. So if you wish to take part, please do, because but if you don't, that's absolutely fine. African spirituality isn't about coercion, about love and sharing and growth. So if you wish to take part, please sit straight in wherever you are. So your back straight, so that your spine is straight, so your energy centers are all in line. Feet flat on the floor, palms on your thighs, and close your eyes. And what we're going to do is we're going to breathe together, and we're going to breathe together 4 times, because 4 is the spiritual number for health, for growth and abundance, and foundation, which we're trying to build. So, and when we breathe out, if you would pull in the stomach, and so that will force the air out of your lungs, and then we relax the stomach and the air will come in through our nose, and that would be 1 cycle. Okay, and I'll lead us. Okay, so we'll begin. So to breathe out, hold it, and now relax, breathe in. Moja. Breathe out. Hold it and relax, breathe in. Starting to feel more relaxed. Breathe out. Hold it. Breathe in. Tatu. More centered. The final time, breathe out. And now relax, breathe in. In there. Wonderful. And now if you can, we can open our eyes and I'll continue. So Mabadalika Ya Nishati. To change the energy or vibration, we now thank the powers, tasks that we have a closer connection with them, and they assist us in manifesting our objectives. And in order to change that vibration, I'm going to use the tool of this triangle chime. I'm going to play this 7 times. 7 times is for wisdom, seeking, and truth, and intuition. It's also seen, 7 is a very strong spiritual number seen throughout existence. So the 7 Guza Saba, 7 colors of the spectrum, 7 major notes of the musical scale, 7 layers to the skin, 7 entry points to the body, and so on and so forth. So as I ring the chime, let the vibration go over you, around you, and through you. Allow that to get you into resonance with the space that you're in. And also by that, linking with universal consciousness, and through that, through our connection all to the universal consciousness, we become in connection and resonance with each other. Okay, so I'll ring it 7 times. Continue to breathe deeply and let the vibration take hold. I'll begin. Moja. Mbili. Tatu. Ine. Tana. Sita. Saba. Okay, we can open our eyes and can follow what's on the screen. Some words it will be in Kiswahili and some will be in Hermetic terms. But all the translations are there. So I begin now on this call and response area, and what we'll say together is Sisi ni kitu kimoja. We are one, or we are the same thing. So I'll begin. Ninaomba ya muomba awote. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba ya nebacha. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya mamiwata. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya shu. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya tefnut. Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya nut.
Sisi ni kitu
kimoja. Excellent. And now we go on to the Paut Neteru. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Paut Neteru. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. And now we go on to the area where we call upon the ancestors. But first, the ancestors in our direct line. We've already called on the first ancestor, the all, and now those in our direct line. So I'll begin. Ninaomba Audrey May Kelly. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Please, and do go Dada. If there's anybody you wish to call upon in your direct bloodline.
Yeah, I'd like to call upon Maria Morrison and David Emmanuel Spence.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Aislinn Rattigan.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Bibi Ketra Reed. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Anybody else that you wish to call upon?
I'm okay at the moment.
Okay. And so now we can go on to those who are not in our direct bloodline, but have given their blood, sweat, tears, their effort, their time, and their lives for our families, for our communities, for our nation, and for our race. Ninaomba Mzee, the Honorable Marcus Mazar Garvey. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Please.
Ninaomba Helen Satori Jata.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mayabu Jean-Jacques Dessalines.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Wazee Amy Ashford Garvey na Amy Jacques Garvey. Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Sheikh Amadou Bamba.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mayabu Nani of the Maroons.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Mzee Kwame Nkrumah. Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Yasantiwa.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mayabu Baba Credo Mutwa.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Mzee Sabonfu Some. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Anyone else? Okay. Ninaomba Mzee Max Bouvier. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Dada, was there someone you wish to call?
There's one more person actually who passed from the Ancestral Voices film. So I'd like to say Ninaomba Mayabu Anoche Asofo Asiedo.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Wazee Nana Bonsu na Baba Tigel na Baba Barenge. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Ndugu Dagi na Dada Jan. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. And now we can call upon those ancestors who we don't always know their names, but they left us a tremendous legacy. First of all, those who we should never forget. Those are the Mangamazi. Ninaomba Mababu ya Mangamazi. Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Sisini Kitu Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mababu ya Haitian Revolution. Sisini Kitu Kimoja. Ninaomba Mababu ya Gula Vita, those who fought in the Gula Wars. Sisini Kita Kamoja.
Sisini Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mababa ya Taifa la Mosai, those of the Mosai Nation. Sisini Kita Kamoja.
Sisini Kita Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mababa ya Freedom and Land Party. Sisini Kita Kamoja.
Sisini Kita Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mababa ya APLA. Sisini Kita Kamoja.
Sisini Kita Kimoja.
Ninaomba Mababa ya San na Twa na Hutu. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Sisini Kimoja.
Ninawaomba wanaishi ambao watatetea sisi na wale mababu ambao bado hawajazaliwa. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kitu Kimoja.
And now I end on the words of power and the affirmation. And please, if you'd like to join me, just speak after me. Nguvu zote.
Nguvu zote.
Nguvu zote.
Kwa watu wetu.
Kwa watu wetu.
Kwa watu wetu.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Mapenzi ya wote.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Asanteni sana. Jamaa.
Okay. Asante sana ndugu Imani. Thank you again.
Karibu, you're welcome. I'd just like to say that I'm especially very glad to see Dada Verona here speaking, because the work that Ancestral Voices, I know personally, changed my life. And I'm eternally grateful for all their sacrifice and everything they've been doing for the past 10 years. And I would say that there's two books or two pieces of work that changed my life. One is The Structure of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, and the other is Ancestral Voices. And I see them exactly as the same. Both will have tremendous legacy for our people for generations to come. Asante Sana.
Wow, Asante Sana. Thank you so much for that welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I will join you at the end. So have a wonderful session.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's stick it on. All right. Yes, greetings again.
Greetings and Ndugu Takaka. Thank you for having me.
No problem. It's a blessing to have you here today. And I'm sure many of our viewers have been looking forward to this because, of course, African spirituality being a cornerstone of our existence here on this earth, African people are always keen to find out more about their spirituality, because as you know, the disconnect with us from Africa in the diaspora for so many years, we lost such a lot. And our spirituality was one of those things, even though we have managed to keep it in some form or another, there was still a great void that needed to be filled. So when yourself and Dalian came on the scene and put those brilliant work together, the process then began. That bridge began to be built, that people could see the connection, and there was something that they could hold on to in a very tangible way. And as Brother Marley said, you have just gone from strength to strength. And, you know, again, we give great thanks for you and the works that you are doing. So first, I'd just like to start off by saying, yes, there's a lot of people would be new to yourself. They would be not familiar with yourself or Dalian or the works that Ancestral Voices that you've been doing. So could you just start off by giving a little bit about yourself, a little background as to who is Verona?
So I'm Verona. I'm one half of what is known as Ancestral Voices. That is an education initiative set up with myself and my husband Dalian 10 years ago. And the initiative is to provide learning resources on African spirituality. And originally it started based on our own experience of our own journeys of questioning and learning. And it started out with us creating a documentary that has now led on to a sequel documentary plus books and courses, all with the aim of providing factual information on African spiritual philosophy, free from religious colonial propaganda, free from religious and colonial propaganda that most of us have been subjected to, for how many odd years. So that's why we were driven to do this work and create a range of learning resources that we could all benefit from. And the whole initiative of Ancestral Voices is not necessarily to tell people that this is what you should be believing in, but just allowing the place for a conversation to take place about this subject and allowing us to make an informed decision. Because what we found is we quite knowledgeable in many other spiritual traditions and faiths, but lack knowledge where it comes to African spiritual philosophies and practices. And that's where we felt compelled to provide these learning resources.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, of course, very few of us would have be born into a household where African spirituality was actively practiced. So at what point would you say that you found yourself being drawn to that way of approaching things?
That's a good question. I was probably, around sort of late 20s, so between the 27 and 28, where I started to question about African spirituality and wanting to learn more about it. But I guess even when I grew up in a traditional Christian, well, I say traditional, I'm Jamaican, so I grew up in a typical Jamaican home where there is a belief in Christianity, but in my home, I didn't go to church. But I remember hearing stories about Obia when I was younger, and I was always really intrigued. So from even at that young age, it had already sparked my interest, but it's not something I actively followed up until my late 20s.
Okay. Yeah, that is very interesting because I myself am from the island of Jamaica, and you mentioned Obia and so forth. It's something that growing up, you heard a lot about. In my case, yes, I was taken to churches, various churches, but one of the things that was present, especially in what they would known as the Church of God of Prophecy, was what we call, or Pocomania. I'm sure you're familiar with Pocomania. And we would see people getting into spirits. They say they're getting into spirits, and then it was always fascinating to me what's really happening, and to find that out. And another very interesting things I found out not too long ago was the people, especially from the Congo, after the end of chattel slavery, there was a lot of indentured laborers taken over. And people from that region came over with, and they brought that African spirituality with them that is still live and well, say, being practiced in Jamaica. So that's fascinating. The other thing now, as we know, I mentioned the Congo, and there's a particular, you can say, belief system there. We know about Yoruba cosmology. We know about the ancient Hermetic system. Now, in terms of ancestral voices, you more or less answered this question. When you first started, was there any temptation to focus on one particular aspect, say, more than the others? The reason I said that, because when my awareness started to grow as well, it was very much around ancient Kemet, because that at the time was all prevailing. People was very, very much into, and then later on came things like Dogon, finding about the Dogon and stuff. So what was your approach in Ancestral Voices?
That's a very good
African
question.
Spirituality.
Very good question. It's interesting because before I met Dalian, he actually had an idea from before to create, I think he wanted to write a book on Akan spiritual philosophies. And then that was about 10 years before I even met him. And then with our union, once we came together and we both explored that we were interested in this subject and we felt quite passionate about changing the narrative that surrounds this topic, the conversation rose again. But I said, what I feel would be more impactful is to, expand the conversation and make it something more general about African spirituality that impacts all of us. So for myself, being from the diaspora and Dalian being continental, we thought it would be quite good to, merge that experience and just having a universal conversation. So, if, for example, in our first documentary, we talk more about the consequence of us neglecting these traditions. We speak about the impact of Hollywood and so forth, how these traditions have been demonized. So it's quite a general conversation, but we felt it was necessary to have a general conversation before we tried to get to lock down on any particular tradition. And by the time we started doing our research, we started to come across the core similarities that can be found. So as you mentioned, there's many different influences that have gone into Jamaica. We can see across the Caribbean, for example, I did an interview earlier this week about Guyana, and within Guyanese spiritual tradition, there's a strong different influence of the different cultures there too. So what we realized is there is a cultural fusion that exists, and that we should focus more on core philosophies that unites us rather than separating ourselves and focusing on one isolated area. Because our research has shown us you've got African spiritual wisdom, and it expresses itself in different ways, no matter where your region is. But at core, we're dealing with that same spiritual essence.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's a good balanced approach, I would say. Now, the next point is in your research, because I've seen your film and it's taken you so far all over, basically all over the world, and to the connections now. Say when you interviewed, say somebody say in South Africa, or somebody in Ghana, or somebody say in Brazil, or somebody in Guyana, or somebody in Jamaica, was there a thread that you found? I mean, did you say, oh, personally interviewed in South Africa, what they say has a direct correlation with something the person in Brazil said? How much crossover did you find?
Oh, wow. The crossovers were absolutely phenomenal. So our whole Spirit is Eternal documentary is a testament to show that we're dealing with the same themes expressed. So, for example, if we talk about the concept of God or the all, or whatever you wish to term it by, you will find that across Africa and in the diaspora, you'll have one universal name that everyone will refer to as the totality. But it's always understood that this God, this all essence is expressed in our natural environment. It's everywhere. So you can't contain to say God is in X, Y, Z. It's understood that God is in all life, in all existence, and importantly within ourselves as well. So there's this understanding of everything being interconnected. If we go on to another example, there is the understanding of the natural forces. So whether we refer to these as the Orishas in Yoruba, or the Loire in Haitian Vodou, or the Neteru in ancient Hermetic spirituality, you will notice that nature is categorized and broken down, and these are all seen as expressions of that creative force. And by understanding each aspect of nature, we gain a new understanding that collectively gives us an understanding of God. So they're not saying these are gods, because if we look at literature, particularly written by Europeans, they call them gods and so forth. And so it's kind of a mistranslation. They're not gods. They are aspects of the divine, as are we. And by understanding all these aspects in nature, we gain an understanding of our total environment, but also ourselves. So that's another thing. Another example that we found that literally across all the continent, we have not seen one place that doesn't have this, is the concept of ancestral reverence, and realizing that life is a cycle, it's a continuous cycle, life, death, and rebirth, that even though someone may not exist in the physical, they still exist in the spiritual, and they can act as guides to their descendants. So the concept of calling on your ancestors and paying reverence to them, which, you know, once again, history books have told us that, oh, it's a backward and primitive thing that these Africans were doing. But, you know, now modern science will tell you, under the study of epigenetics, that we do carry down memories. We do carry down phobias and different traits from our genetic line. So the whole concept of calling our ancestors is actually now rooted in science, that even as I do this interview today, I can call upon all those great teachers, all those great historians who exist in my DNA, to call upon them to help them, for me to deliver an interview that allows me to express this information fully and clearly for everyone to understand. So the concept of ancestral reverence is the acknowledgement and knowing that you can invoke your ancestors, you can invoke that essence that exists within your own DNA to bring them forth, to help you, to provide guidance, and to enable that continuation of life to go on. So, I mean, there's just 3 examples that I've given. I mean, oh, wow, I could go on all day. There's ritual practices. There's the whole concept of ritual, understanding that there is cause and effect. So we tie back into the universal principles as well, which is very important. That you will see the 7 Hermetic principles, as they're known. As we know, they come from Tahuti in Kemet, but those principles can be found across these spiritual traditions as well. So in concepts of ritual, you can have a ritual that is carried out in a different way in every region, but has the same purpose. So it's that understanding of a symbolic gesture can have a physical outcome. And so it's understanding how to manipulate energies and how to, most importantly, use your intention, which is the power of mentalism, to manifest your reality. So there's just a few, but definitely the correlations that can be found across the continent are truly phenomenal. And what is amazing as well is how much information has been retained in the diaspora as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, the other thing is, this question I'm just saying that in your research, at any time, did it involve, say, actually, I don't know, going into a religious establishment, say, for instance, like a church or a mosque, and actually trying to put forward some of these concepts? And if it did, did you face a lot of opposition? Was it understood, or was it something that people just totally rejected?
So what do you mean, going into churches or mosques to do what?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, even if it's not a church or mosque, say you're giving a presentation then to a general audience.
Oh, yes.
What kind of feedback do you get? I mean, do you get a lot of people just saying that's just totally, because I know that on the continent itself, I mean, a few years ago, I was watching something in Nigeria, for instance, where people was actually attacking and destroying shrines.
Yes.
Because as far as they're concerned, it's totally, and we saw in Marley, for instance, when they had the insurgents and one of the things they went and started destroying places like Timbuktu and Jena and smashing up mosque, thinking it's absolutely abominable in terms of for this spirituality to be carried on in today's world. So have you ever come across any situations like that in your journeys?
We've come across it in, like yourself, so just general research that we have seen. So for example, in Brazil, this is a massive situation where it's happening now, where they are desecrating shrines and so forth. So on that aspect, in terms of the world, yes, there is a lot of hate and stigma that surrounds practitioners of African spirituality. In terms of ourselves, we've only had one real negative situation that I can remember We had a film screening at the BFI in London, UK, and we had a double bill screening with a documentary that was about Fela Kuti. So anyone who knows about Fela Kuti knows that he was very proud of his heritage. He would openly perform like ritual acts on stage. So it would, to me, it was a very obvious match that they would put this as a double bill alongside our first documentary, Esoteric African Knowledge. However, we did notice a significant of people walk out the cinema, and one of the people actually came up to my husband, Dalian, really aggressively and shouting, saying, "What did you make this documentary for? What's the point of what you're trying to do here?" And, that was the first time we'd ever had any sort of negativity to our face. I'm sure lots of people behind closed doors the same thing, but that was the first time it was actually brought to us. And we weren't phased. We went into this knowing that there would possibly be some sort of backlash. We did have friends and family kind of distance themselves from us around the time when we started doing this work, because mentally for them, they couldn't also comprehend why we would choose to do something like this. But for us, it hasn't deterred us. What we have found, though, is we necessarily haven't received the support that we should have over this 10 years of doing it. Like, we've had to do a lot of things ourselves. So we've always self-promoted, for example. So we found that we're not always going to get a chance to speak on someone else's platforms. Whenever we're asked to do any shows, I'm always grateful. So I give thanks to PACMTV for allowing this conversation to take place. I mean, we've had black radio shows in the past say we are not allowed to go on because the owners of the station are Christian and therefore it's going to create conflict and all these kind of things. So it's just really sad that, even though we talk about being black and we talk about being African, we talk about uniting and celebrating our heritage and our culture, but then it's like, okay, but just don't talk about African spirituality because that's not allowed here. That's kind of the mentality that we've faced quite a bit, to be fair.
Jeez. Yeah, that's well. Now, the other question, during your 10 years, due to your books and your film, have you noticed gathering interest? Have you noticed the numbers growing or people coming to you wanting to find out much more? And maybe some of those people that was quite negative in the beginning, as things has grown, they have now turned around and come to you. But have you noticed a trend, say from when it started until now, the interest has grown?
Definitely, absolutely. When we first started, to be fair, we actually did get a lot of interest. I was actually surprised by how much people were interested in this subject. And I think at that time, we were a voice that was kind of going against the crowd. So we stood out. So a lot of people were like, wow, this is groundbreaking. I can't believe you guys are saying this openly. So we allowed that conversation to take place then. And then definitely over the years, we've seen a collective consciousness shift. Like, a lot more people are now interested. There's been a lot more of a movement for pride in being African. And that's not even just necessarily spiritual centered, but just more in people being more accepting of themselves, their names, their background, their heritage, and particularly among younger people as well. They were very strong on the whole proud to be African thing. In terms of the spiritual side, there's still, issues with that. There's a lot of people who still claim to be African and proud and so forth, but the spiritual aspect is still overlooked. But largely, there is a massive sort of explosion in terms of the interest in African spirituality. And I think that's down to a multitude of things, down to the technology we have these days. Obviously, we started out in Facebook in 2010, and we saw how, much interest was generated then. And then now you've got all these other things, Instagram, Twitter, all this. And so it's allowing this information to become more accessible. And then what's also happened is the sort of mainstream has also plugged into this growing trend. So then we'll see programs that now openly have African spiritual themes included. So, for example, we've just finished watching Lovecraft Country, and the very last episode is very clearly focused on ancestors and going back and getting ancient knowledge and using your spiritual wisdom and your magic to create your reality. So these things have now become part of popular mainstream culture. So I think whilst it's wonderful that there has been an explosion of this knowledge, I think it's also important that we as African people control the narrative as well, and not allow it to kind of get sensationalized by the traditional Hollywood voodoo images that we're seeing of like dead people coming out of cemeteries and stuff like that. So I think we need to be very careful about the narrative that is put forward, and that we do maintain a certain level of respect, integrity, and truth about these spiritual philosophies, because a lot of people kind of get caught up with the gloss. A lot of people now I see are very focused on what they feel are these wonderful aspects of African spirituality. And a lot of people are not prepared to do the research. And these days people are like, oh, I'm this Orisha, I'm that Orisha. And they only learned about Orishas last week, but they're already saying they're this Orisha. So I think with knowledge comes responsibility. So people do need to make sure that they are fully aware and informed of what they're doing, so they can go forward. But overall, seeing the change in consciousness has been very fascinating and liberating. And I feel that it's an essential step for us as African people to move forward.
Okay, I'd just like to remind people this is very much an interactive show, so you're welcome to send in questions and comments as we go along. So please just get your questions and comments in. You know, very interactive. So we'd love for you to participate in this as well. Yeah. Now the other question is, you said yes, of course, there's been a massive interest, upsurge in it. Now, what I've noticed, especially, you know, because, you know, I'm very much involved with the art center, and we had people booking the place out, and we had groups booking the place out. And what we found with certain of the African spiritual movements, which kind of surprised us, was the amount of non-Africans showing an interest and wanting to get involved. You know, what's your view on that? And how do you also have many of non-Africans approach you in terms of finding out more about African spirituality?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. We have noticed that. To be fair, because we've even noticed through even doing our research, and a lot of the books we've had to read are written predominantly by non-African authors as well. So there has clearly been a strong interest from non-Africans for years. And so it is always an interesting one when, because if we look at the historical legacy of this situation, it's always difficult for myself. I personally struggle because sometimes, sorry, let me articulate myself clearly. Let me answer your question properly. So, when we're talking about spirit, then spirit should be spirit. If you're drawn to a particular tradition, then, you know, that's your calling. That's what you've been told to do. If it's not meant to be, then whatever will happen on your journey to stop that from happening. For myself, on that perspective, I see white people asking about the traditions, and I think, you know, I may have my own preconceived ideas, and that's purely because of the historical legacy of us sharing certain information and allowing ourselves to be open and vulnerable, and having the situation reversed and turned and used against us. But equally, we have seen there are many people across the African continent who have been initiated into certain traditions, and that's widespread. So I feel like it's not for me to judge on their particular spiritual path, but I do feel that if we have non-Africans being initiated into these traditions, that we still need to be very careful that it's not a case where they will come in and take over, you know, something that has been ancestrally passed down to us. And so I feel quite strongly about that. But it's a very dodgy ground. It's a fine line. But yeah, we definitely have noticed it quite a bit. There is an interest. And with the work that Ancestral Voices does, ours is not necessarily about initiating people. I mean, obviously that's something that you would go and see a traditional practitioner for. For us, it's primarily about education. Everybody needs to be educated. So for us, I don't care where you're from across the globe, we need to be educated so we fully understand these traditions. Why? Because it's important. all of us have been collectively brainwashed into believing that these traditions are negative, they're evil, they're only used for negative things. But if we are really serious about knowledge and learning and understanding, then understanding about African spirituality is like that missing part of the jigsaw puzzle that gives us the knowledge that we need. By putting that part of the jigsaw puzzle in, everything else starts to make sense. And this is why I do advocate that everybody, regardless of your race, background, or whatever, educate themselves. And not just African spirituality, but on anything, because that's what gives you more of a holistic understanding of life. So hopefully I've answered your question fully. I'm not sure.
No, yes. I mean, it's just because it's something that I have noticed, not just here, but also on the continent. Like I said, you see it. Because, for example, in the Senegal, you have, when we was calling out the names, I mentioned the name Sheikh Amadou Bamba. Now, to the outside, looking at the outside, people will say, but he's just a Muslim. So that doesn't really fit into African spirituality. But like in the West, like with a lot of the church, we had to hide our African spirituality, behind in order to be, in order to practice it. Likewise, I found a lot of things like that happen on the continent. So although from the face of it, people say it's just Muslim, when you get behind it now, you see African spirituality is alive and well.
Very much.
And what alarmed me, there's a place in the Senegal called Touba, the holy city of Touba. And actually going there, it was surprising to see the amount of, say, non-Africans actively, as you know, participating in this, which brings me to the next question. Now, I know when it comes to spirituality stroke religion, there's quite a bit of overlap to a certain extent. So during your research, because again, I asked a question because speaking to people in the Senegal known as the Pool people, a lot of them were of the opinion that they actually originated in India. And if you look at how they practice their practices in terms of, the cow is an important part in certain aspect, and look at Hinduism, you find there's a great overlap in that. So in your research, how much overlap did you find in, say, the African spiritual beliefs and other beliefs such as Hinduism or Buddhism? Did your research take you to that to give you an insight into some of the overlaps that's going on?
Yeah. So, for example, if you look for Hinduism, I would say is probably one of the closest spiritual systems to relates to African spiritual philosophies and practices, in the sense that if you even look the way they break down their deities would very much resemble what we have. And in terms of they have altars set up, they have the individual deities that one can be the one that is your primary energy, so that correlates directly to what, in the Yoruba tradition, which will be your Orisha, which will be the ruler of your head. So then there'd be somebody from Hinduism who would have, I don't know, Ganesh or somebody, and that's who they work with. So on that level, definitely there were correlations that were mind-blowing. Then we can look at concepts across the sort of Eastern regions, such as meditation and yoga. And then we've also found these within African spiritual traditions as well. So one of them that I can think of at the top of my head is in, so Dibia, which is the traditional name for, I guess what you would call shamans in, for the Igbos. They have a breathing technique that involves humming like a bee. And so that is a way to enter a form of meditation. Then you have Baba Credo Mutwa, who's Zulu from Southern Africa. And he also talks about meditation. He talks about being extremely still and being able to raise, which he calls Umbelini, but if we listen, it sounds exactly like Kundalini. And when he speaks about it, it's about raising that Kundalini energy, which is the same thing, like it's the same concept being explored. And so even down to ancient Kemet, where there's depictions on the walls that resemble what we would call yoga today. And even when we even take the concept of dance in African spirituality, they're ultimately different postures that are used, which, you know, also can tie back to that whole concept of yoga and movement and allowing the body to move. Another one I just want to throw in there real quick is, for example, if we look at like Shintoism, I believe for the Japanese people are very big on their ancestral reverence, so that's also part of their culture. And what else? There was one more thing I want to say. Sufism. Sufis use the concept of dance to go into trance. They do like a spinning. And if you look into many African traditions, one that stands out to me is the Khoisan people, for example, from Southern Africa. They do a particular dance that enables them to start channeling and allowing the ancestors to come through and allow a space for healing. So there's so many correlations. And that's why I said learning about African spirituality is that missing part of the jigsaw puzzle, because once you do that, everything else you start to see, oh, so that's where that's from. And oh, I can see that. So even as I'm speaking now, if we look at, I believe the Yoruba do it and the Eways of Ghana do it, where they do that chicken ritual, where they'll have a chicken and they'll use it to cleanse their head, to clear them of any negative spirituality. And we can see that this is practiced in Judaism in the Yom Kippur. So there are so many correlations when we start looking at other traditions across the globe. It's actually phenomenal.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I'd just like to remind everybody, interaction programs, so send in your questions and send in your comments if you'd like to be part of this discussion. Now, that's very interesting because
in the Yom Kippur, sorry.
yeah. I want to say that's very interesting because, you know, I remember, you know, reading through some of the books, such as Sheikh Anta Diop, what he was talking about, Kemet, and various other, and Chancellor Williams and George James. And there was touching on things like Hinduism and saying, well, in fact, it was the Africans that actually went there and are the bedrock of those things. Because, for example, you mentioned Kundalini and stuff. Well, amongst the Igbos, you have the concept of chi, which is exactly the same as, you know, in China when they say the chi and they can get that spirit within you. So we can see a lot of, I mean, just to bring a small story to light. In Birmingham, where we are based in Handsworth there, the building that we have got, remember one time we wanted to put a wall around the front because people just used to drive up on the forecourt. And so we said, let's put up a wall, but we wanted to put some obelisks along the wall, large obelisks. Now, directly in front of us is a Hindu temple. Directly in front is a Hindu temple. And further up the road on Soho Road, we have a Sikh temple. And then just down the road, Peribai, you have a big mosque. Now, when we approached the Birmingham City Council in that time to put up these things, as far as they was concerned, no objection, they don't see nothing wrong with it. So I'm beginning to work, and the Hindus first saw what we're doing, they objected. Straight away they objected.
Oh, really?
And go to the council and said they do not want us to put up those things. Then we had a situation one time where the Hindus, Muslim stuff, was basically picketing us and threatening us and saying we cannot put those things. Wow. And then even the council themselves was kind of scratching their head and said, we can't. And then it came to light that the Hindus said by putting that up, it would nullify a lot of the energies, positive energies that's coming to them. So there was a to and fro things for a long time, and then some kind of compromise was met. Okay, we had to reduce the size that there were to be, And then what fascinates us was when the temple came across and they says, fine, if those are to go up, we have to build something within our grounds to counter it, which was a pyramid.
Oh. They
and
built
now,
the pyramid.
Yeah, pyramid would have to be built. But the only people that can build a pyramid that would be effective against the obelisk is Black people. You know, so at the end, they had to engage some Black workers to come and put up a pyramid in their yard to act as a counterbalance against the obelisk. And then it just woke us up. You know, we said, my gosh. And then when it did have a chance to go in the temple, I never entered it, but one of a couple of our members managed to go into the inner sanctuary. And they said all the deity were of Black people, Black as you can get African people were there.
In the Hindu temple. Wow.
In the Hindu temple. As you know, what they show to the world is just one's bluish color, one's light, you know. But when they saw the true picture of what they actually are, they were Black people. So that's why I say it's fascinating that African spirituality is everywhere we can. Now, the other thing I'd like to bring up now is Kwanzaa. Now, as you know, Kwanzaa is something that's celebrated worldwide now. You know, started in 1966 by Dr. Maulana Karanga. But I came across a situation once. There's a brother, he's from Sierra Leone. His wife was from Tanzania. And he said on one occasion, they actually went to a Kwanzaa. And his wife actually didn't know what to make of it. And then in the end, she objected strongly what was going on. You know, because as you know, it's based on Kiswahili, the language, and it is Kiswahili. And they was wondering, this is just something just like something just bashed together that had no meaning, no sense to them. So my thing is, I know Maulana Karanga, right, is still very much around, who put it together. But what's your view on Kwanzaa as a spiritual, in terms of African spirituality, how it's conducted, and say the benefit of it to Africans? Do you think it's authentic?
Authentic in what way? If you
authentic that it can't be categorized as an African spiritual practice, as a genuine African spiritual practice, and not so just something just made up. Somebody just sat down and made something up for convenience sake.
Okay, so I guess authentic in this terms means that it's not something that you can necessarily trace back to the African continent. Is that what you mean by authentic then?
Yes, yeah, because that's what she was saying. A lot of it she don't not recognize. So it's something that he's probably just made up. Yeah.
And so I understand where she's coming from. And so I think her point is valid. And I also see the validity in doing the Kwanzaa ritual as well. And I'll speak from a spiritual perspective on this side. As I mentioned before, everything, power is in mentalism. So as long as you have a particular intention and you are doing a ritual with its set purpose, then there is power that you give to that particular ritual. And there's even more power when something is done collectively. So as we've seen, we had our own traditions on the continent. We were separated by colonialism and all these other things. And we went into the diaspora and we took our existing concepts and wisdom, but we had to make do with the different tools that we had in our new locations. So you could argue these are not authentic African rituals, but we still took them with us. We took that knowledge with us and applied it in a new way, and was still able to bring forth the desire that we put our minds to. So for me, I think what is the main focus is the group intention of why you're doing a ritual, and the fact that we shouldn't get stuck on that something has to be done in a particular way. I believe that ritual is something that evolves, traditions evolve, and we just have to be able to maneuver and be able to make our own situations work. So you could argue, yes, this was something that's been set up in modern times. It's not something that's historical. But as we know already, spirituality is about adapting and flowing. So you can use any ritual for your own benefit. So even somebody might say, oh, why are you celebrating Christmas or something like that? You can still use that sort of solstice energy to do what you're doing. You don't have to get into Father Christmas and all that. It's about tapping into the energy. So I would always say that would be my primary focus. What is your intention? What are you trying to do? What is the collective benefit of doing this ritual?
Okay, that's,
and also,
yeah,
actually,
that's very...
Sorry, I was just going to say, before we go on to your next question as well, I just wanted to say, going back to what you said about the Hindu temple, and they didn't want you to build up the obelisks. I think that is a very, very powerful story. And it's one that shows us the importance of understanding ourselves spiritually. There's a lot of community groups around where we look at them and we think, how can they prosper? How are they doing so well in these oppressive societies? But we seem to be struggling and crumbling. Why? Because they still understand their spiritual knowledge. They've retained certain cultural wisdom that exists. And that's why they were fighting so hard, saying, no, we don't want your obelisk. Because they know. The thing is about us, we don't know. We've been so fearful and running away from ourselves and who we are and our sacred knowledge that we've lost our power. But by understanding ourselves and knowing ourselves, our sacred symbolism, everything that's now been depicted to us as demonic and evil are things that if we actually understand what they mean, we can start to use them for our own benefit. So I just felt the need to add that in because it's a very, very powerful.
That's, yeah, because like I said, it's a thing that took us aback at the time when it happened. We then had to go and do some of our own research to say, what is it? Where's the connection? Which was very fascinating. Now, as you say, you've been going for 10 years, and within that 10 years, you've produced some groundbreaking work. How do you see the next 10 years? What's your plan? I mean, have you got it mapped out already? Is there people you would still like to interview? Is there places you're still planning to go? In terms of, and is there African spiritual system that you think you have not yet tapped into that you would like to get to do that?
That's a very big and good question. Whoa. Well, the last film took 5 years, so I'm still kind of recovering from that one. That one was hard work. But everyone always says, is there going to be an Ancestral Voices free? I don't think so. But if there were to be an Ancestral Voices free, we would definitely expand and make it a lot more in depth. And as you said, making the correlations to, global correlations, because I think that is really important. In terms of places that on the African continent I would like to go, I think if we get to go to, say, Ethiopia, it would have been wonderful to include that in. Places like Congo as well. There's just so, to go and see the Dogon as well. There's just so many different aspects that we would have loved to include it. But we pretty much self-funded the entire project. So the first film we funded ourselves. The second film we funded about 70% of it. The rest was crowdfunded. So we've put so much of not just our time, but our financial resources in this project. So realistically, I don't know if there's going to be another one. And I don't know, man. I'm still catching up on my sleep, if I'm being honest. But in terms of where I see us in 10 years, I see us, or what I would like to see, is people having communal public shrines outside. That's when I feel like I've actually done what I'm here to do. If you go to somewhere like Japan, for example, they would have public shrines where they'll go pray to their ancestors, and then they'll just carry on going to work. It's seen as normal. It's part of the culture. And that's what I want to see for us, to be able to embrace our heritage and be so proud of it. And it's just something that is normal. Not that, oh my God, they have an altar. Yeah, of course you have an altar. It's your house. That's what I want to see. I want to see that level of change in consciousness. Another thing, actually, we've been asked to be involved in. There's a petition going around at the moment. I'll put it in the chat. That's also about legalizing African spirituality, because for many people may not be aware, because of old colonial laws, particularly across the Caribbean, many of us cannot still practice our own indigenous spiritual faith. So there's certain systematic colonial rules that need to be broken down to allow true liberation to take place. So if anyone who wants to support that, I put the change.org petition in there. And the change.org petition is to raise awareness at this stage, to galvanize people, and then it will ultimately be a petition on uk.gov. So it will be an official one, but it needs to be a conversation that's had. So for me personally, where I see Ancestral Voices is becoming more active, I guess, in terms of being vocal in systematic change, because spiritual, like the Haitian Revolution, for example, why that was so beautiful is because they used their spiritual knowledge, but they also did physical fighting. You got to do both. You can't just be all in the spiritual and then there's no physical action, or you can't just be all in a physical action and have no spiritual. There's got to be that balance. That's what my art is about. So I feel that for us, it's becoming a lot more outspoken and being a lot more practical in our approach. So yes, you have spiritual knowledge, but it has to be applied. We have to live it, breathe it, eat it, sleep it. And any form of oppressive regimes need to just come down. That's when we're talking about true liberation for us. And that's true spiritual liberation also.
Okay. Now, there's a fascinating thing that you brought up about in some places we are actually not permitted to practice our spirituality. So, because that's something quite new to me, you know, as you said it. So, you mentioned the Caribbean. So, where in the Caribbean, what do you mean if somebody, say, wanted to form an African spiritual ritual? Would it be, would the authorities actually say you cannot?
They can do. So, for example, in Jamaica, we're both Jamaican, they still have obia laws in place. So this is something that people have been kind of campaigning about for a while. There's conversations that keep coming up about it, then it disappears again. But right now, it's still illegal to technically practice obia in Jamaica. So that means that people still have to be moving in silence when they're doing their things. Some people still do things in the open, but you do put yourself at risk. You're vulnerable. And also what it means is that we're not seen as equal in society. If we talk about religious tolerance, but where is the tolerance for people who adhere to an African spiritual faith? So what we're talking about is we're still being ostracized in 2020 for just being authentically who we are. And so this is why, I mean, I believe it's still in like, I think Barbados still have it. I can't remember all the top of my head which countries still have it, but primarily across the Caribbean, this is very much a real issue.
That's interesting, because to be honest, in this country we had a when I say similar, some kind of problem, because in Birmingham actually there's a spiritual movement that they have, and as you know, as a religious or spiritual entity, in terms of the law, you're supposed to get certain financial relief. You know, because if you set up a church or a mosque or a temple, you can go to the council and say, this is a place of worship. So you either don't pay no rate, so it's very much reduced. Now, I know in Birmingham, when that center of worship was set up and they went to the council and says, this is a African spiritual approach, African spiritual temple, place of worship, they refused to apply the law to them. It's like they wouldn't take them seriously. They said, nah, it's not. So in the end, they had to come and visit, see the shrine, see the altar. And, you know, and still, it was like dragging their feet, because I suppose they've gone and checked all the bylaws and can we really support this? You know, is this really recognized? So it's interesting to see how much pressure we are under. And the other point I want to bring up now is on the African continent itself, because it was just a few days ago, I was watching something on YouTube where some brothers and sisters had relocated. I think it was the Gambia. And, you know, part of their thing, they would pour libation and give something to their ancestors. And then looking at the comments, you could see that the people say, this is a Muslim country. Those people are practicing, what do they say, you know, black magic or something. And even the word, you know, in Muslim, jinns, they're dealing with these jinns, these evil spirits. And we're not going to put up with it. So I'm thinking our backs against the wall in places like that. So in terms of your view on that, because one of the things that I've noticed now, there's an upsurge in people actually relocating back to the continent.
Yes.
Very much so in the past couple of years. You know, people, there's definitely a movement of people that's getting up, relocating. And a lot of the ones who are in the forefront of that are what you would label very much a Pan-Africanist, has a Pan-Africanist outlook. So of course, you're back in the continent, they're going to want to try and revive or start practicing some of their African spirituality. Now, it's just a general point. I mean, what advice would you give to them in terms of, because I know, for instance, I would say if you're going to a predominantly Muslim country, watch yourself kind of thing.
Literally.
They would, because like I mentioned, the Muslim countries that I'm used to, and it's very much practiced, but it's very much hidden, it's very much cloaked under, you know, the state religion of Islam or stuff. So, I mean, what would be your advice to somebody like that? Just, you know, just in general terms.
I would say that, you know, we're living in the UK now, and we may be used to certain stigmas and so forth for practicing African spirituality. However, if you're going to the African continent, you're going to have to go with a different mentality completely. Whilst it should be the norm to go there and be open and free, depending on where you're based, you're going to have to use some discretion. So I would advise that people really keep it to their own limited, you know, environment. It's not something that you should necessarily be parading, because not only are you dealing with people who will look at you and say you're practicing witchcraft and all the rest of it, but you also can start dealing with people who will even use the very same science that they're knocking, you know, under the guise of I go to church every, you know, Sunday, or I go to the mosque, but they can use that science against you as well. So I would say for people who are going back home and you are embracing your African spiritual heritage, don't put it on display, because unfortunately, we're not ready yet. Quite frankly, the mentality is not there. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in removing those colonial shackles that exist on all of us. But in the African continent, particularly where religion is so prevalent there. I mean, I went to Ghana, and I just couldn't believe there was literally like a church on every corner. No exaggeration. And so you're just bombarded with all these images of white Jesus, and it's so strong to the point where people don't even question it. It's just like, of course, that's what it is. You know, it's even on the back of the buses and things like that. Like, it's just crazy. So I would say that, yeah, you just have to be discreet and realize that not everybody is where you are mentally. And unless you're living in some kind of big open space somewhere where you can do what you want and no one's going to bother you, you know, that would be wonderful. But yeah, it's not for everybody, because you have to be very careful.
Okay, so we have a question that just come up here. And it says, how would you define how crucial the practice of spirituality is to the future of African people around the world?
Good question. How would you define crucial? I personally would say, for me, it gives you knowledge of self, because at its core, African spirituality is about understanding and knowing yourself. It is about being able to connect with all those different aspects of yourself that exist within your DNA. So your ancestors are literally you. They exist within you. So if you start tapping into all that generational memory that exists before you, all that knowledge, all those experiences, you become a much more enlightened version of yourself. You're now walking through life with a certain level of knowledge, but you're also walking through life with a certain level of protection once you start calling on them. So it almost like in situations where you can almost foresee certain situations before they even happen. Not because you're necessarily telepathic or anything like that, but just because, or psychic, sorry, but just because you're that in tune with your own self, that life, I'm not saying you don't have any problems once you start, implementing African spiritual practices in your life. You do have problems, but you're able to find solutions. You don't just become stuck in a rut. You become more liberated in your thought and therefore your actions. So therefore, I see that it's a very empowering sense of being. And so what we currently have is a situation where we have been depowered. For me, I always would say ancestors and calling on your ancestors is like your spiritual armor. If you're walking through life with no knowledge of your ancestors or no respect and no reciprocity going on with you and them, you're walking around spiritually naked every day. And that's why you're open to any form of attack, no matter from who, where, what direction. That's what I always say. So by embracing your spiritual heritage and knowing yourself, you give yourself that necessary grounding that prepares you and enables you to kind of navigate through this reality.
Okay, yep. And again, I just like to encourage people to send in questions. I'm quite intrigued because normally we get a flood of questions in. I don't know if people are thinking about what to put, or it's just a subject that they're not
Also,
sure.
I just want to correct myself on a thing you said earlier. I think Barbados may have lifted their particular opium law, but I just wanted to make sure I say that, so I'm not people say she's wrong. But there is a lot of countries that are still under that, by the way. Okay. And also on the back of the relevance of African spirituality, I'd say is just even the fact that you become more aware of your relationship with nature. So suddenly your existence is no longer just about you in this physical being at this moment in time. You see yourself from greater levels. You understand that you are being navigated, that this is a physical body and you're being navigated by spirit. So you even start seeing how your relationship with nature changes. You start seeing that animals will start having a different relationship with you, for example. They may be more open to be in your presence. You may start to become aware of the signs and symbols in your life. So by walking this path, you actually access different dimensions of you. So you're no longer stuck in this physical 3D reality. You can see beyond that. You have more of a greater connection to everything. And then you start to realize how powerful you are. So then you're no longer dictated to by what people say about you. You're more operating from an inner knowing and inner understanding that you're greater than this. So for me, it's very, very empowering for us as African people to have that self-love. That's what it is. To love yourself is to know yourself. Because the fact that many of us are quite happy to discard and ignore our ancestors, to me, as I always say, your ancestors are you. If you're discarding your ancestors, you're discarding yourself. So already you're hollow, something's missing, you're not grounded. And so by embracing this knowledge, and it's like you're filling yourself up with that vitality that you need, that essence that will enable you to navigate through this world properly.
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, the next point I'd like to bring up is African spirituality, as you say, is everywhere. And I think a lot of people are practicing it without realize what they're doing. I'll give you an example in terms of and how others as well, non-African, recognize the power of it. Tony Brida brought out a book called, I think it's called Egypt on the Plutoma, the Plutoma River that goes through Washington, D.C. And he said when Washington, D.C. was being planned out, as you know, there's a big obelisk. There's all this symbolism taken from an African spiritual aspect has been applied. If you look at the dollar bill, for instance, they've put the pyramid on it. They've put all our symbols everywhere. The courts of law, you have the scales of justice. and so forth. Now, say for instance in Jamaica, whenever a person started to build a house, what do? They pour libation.
Yeah.
You know, before the foundation goes down. I wonder how many of them realized what they were doing. Again, you would go to the rum bars, and before my grandfather, before he took a sip, he would pour some on the ground.
Same.
And I bet if you say to him, why did he do that? What's the significance? He's probably struggling to tell you, but it's just in him. He knows that he knows to do it. So my point is that a lot of African spirituality is being, how could I put it, is innate in us, which is, it manifests itself every day. And then sometimes I wonder what, if I was to look at that tradition, I wonder, where did it come from? But you do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so I would say there's another point here. Let's see if it's just a point or a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We've been disempowered because from day one, we've been taught that we're inferior, we're less than. We go to school, we're educated in systems that tell us that we were slaves and that's all we did and we didn't contribute to history. So there's been this ongoing narrative from day one to try and make us feel bad for who we are. Then we watch TV, for example, they're demonizing our spirituality. Even look at all those little charity videos, those UNICEF and whatever, NSCC or whatever. And then you'll see like starving children in Africa. Like that was literally my childhood. I remember I've been seeing those images on TV for decades. And they've been doing this systematically to us to make us feel that we are inferior. And that is why I keep saying that there is power in self-knowledge. There is power in embracing who you are. And there's power in invoking your ancestors and calling on that strength within you. Because we're living in a system that has been designed to keep us mentally oppressed. And I'm going to bring it back to mentalism again, because mentalism is so important. So as long as you believe you're a victim, as long as you believe you're oppressed, as long as you have thoughts that you are inferior, and especially collectively, then that will manifest in our reality.
Okay, I'm just trying to see if there's no. Come on, audience, come on, just join in, send in some more points and questions. I know you must have a lot in your mind. Just let it come. I don't know if Brother Imani at this time would like to come in, because I know he's somebody. You see, just give you a background on the organization that we belong to, the Pan-African Congress movement. As it knows, I deem myself what we call Pan-Africanists. And there was something lacking within the organization that at first we couldn't put our fingers on. In that, yes, we were going out, we were talking about Pan-Africanism and, you know, African people getting back together. But looking back on it, we gave only a passing, you can say a passing view of terms of African spirituality. One, because at the time, probably we never really understood it ourselves. So we couldn't delve in it to that extent. And the other reason, we thought if we're going to liberate ourselves, you know, with the archetype of mind, it's got to be done through the bullets. As Malcolm said, the ballot or the bullet, we would say the bullets at the time. So it's very much that approach. And then what we found, people were coming into the organization and they would reach a point where there was something, they would say there's something lacking. And there was a certain section we put in to bring more spirituality to it. And then there'd be another section that would be say resisting it. This is not the time. And what I've noticed in the past few years now, a lot of even the really vocal one against it are all now embraced it. Embraced it, not just embrace it, but embraced it in such a way that they now become practitioners, you know, and gone out very much into Africa, into the Congo, into various other places, and actually learn from the people there, and actually trying to put that back into the community. Now the questions are flowing in. That's good. But that's something, again, that, let me put this one up. Then I said, very interested in the powerful knowledge you mentioned earlier.
So
Okay, about the DNA carrying around in the memories.
Emory University did a study back in 2013, which was a study of epigenetics. And what they were focusing on is blocking certain genetic markers within your DNA so that they could control different aspects. So for example, there are certain fears and phobias that can be carried down, so they can be removed, so you don't no longer have those traits. They're also trying to isolate, you know, if you have particular illnesses and so forth. But ultimately, the key aspect of why I'm speaking about epigenetics is because all those memories, all that knowledge, all those fears, phobias exist within us. So sometimes you may even be fearful of something and you're like, why? There's no reason. I have no reason to be scared of this particular thing. In my case, it's spiders. I don't like spiders. But maybe in a past life or something, or one of my ancestors maybe were bitten by a spider and they died or something like that. So there's a lot of knowledge that is encoded in our DNA already. So even when we look at our collective trauma, we look at our African Holocaust, and then they keep showing you these Hollywood movies that reinforce these things in your mind. That's why you watch these things and you get so, you feel emotion. Why? Because those memories, those experiences exist within you. And I'm not saying it's necessarily negative to watch these things, but in the same way some of these traumatic experiences exist within us, there are other aspects too. There's so much wisdom. There's so much history. There's so much knowledge. People always ask to me, you know, how can I tap into particular wisdom about, you know, spiritual knowledge? You can call upon those great healers and psychics within your own DNA and ask them to show you certain things, because that knowledge exists within you. And it's down to us to learn our spiritual abilities and learn to invoke that knowledge. This is now being backed by science, but we need to bring it back into our original knowledge base of utilizing this ability for our benefit to help and navigate us through our daily realities.
Okay. And just before bringing Brother Marley, just to say again, as you mentioned earlier, you touched on the Haitian Revolution. And that was a classic example of invoking the ancestors to physically help you in that battle and in the time to strengthen you and give you that courage. And they had to dig deep. And we can see the, how can I put it, the effect it had on the people, the French, the British, the Spanish, when they saw these people, you know, developing these, doing these incredible feats and having no fear. They turned and ran, a lot of them, because they thought these people are possessed. I'm no longer fighting a human being. What am I fighting? You know, and so it just shows that, yes, definitely it is within us. So I just like to bring in Ndugwe Mane now, because you're very much somebody that within the organization now that's gone down the spiritual path and helping the rest of us along the way. And as you always say, it's something that is in you. You don't have to belong to any particular group to say, well, I'm into Dogon cosmology, I'm into this, I'm into that. African spirituality comes as a holistic package. I don't know if you'd like to say a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the people who helped me lose my fear of that kind of thing, of feeling not worthy enough, of I'm not born on the continent, I don't speak an African language, you know, I don't know enough, and little old me, who is me to be talking about or speaking about African spirituality, despite me being part of Pan-African Congress movement for 20 odd years, you know, 25 odd years, reading lots of stuff on Kemet and so on and so forth, still feeling like a baby and still feeling I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I know it's important, but I don't know about it. And the people who helped me understand that was Ancestral Voices. That freedom of saying it's within you, and the biggest, and they could say it as much as they liked. But the thing came about is experiencing it. It's when you do it. You can't do African spirituality by dipping your little toe in. You have to go with it, and you have to have no fear.
Yes.
You have to let go of the fear. Now, we know that, you know, from our indoctrination, whether it's Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and stuff like that, there's fear that's being pumped in, like the Dada was saying, you know, there's constantly things like that. But you just have to get past that and just say, let me just try this. And they will give their stories about how they do this, whether it was Dalian, he didn't know, and he lit a candle and started saying to his grandmother, and then it started to come. Dada Verona, again, you know, speaking to our ancestors, that said, you know, I'm just going to speak. Let me just do it. And the same goes for me, you know. When I first came across Ancestral Voices, what blew my mind was they were talking about it in a way that no one else I had heard talk about it before. Not that anybody hadn't, but I just hadn't come across it, where it was joining the golden dots between all of their spiritual traditions. And it was in digestible form. It was in a little book, you know, and a video, and that just, you know, opened it up. And when you went deeper into it, it's saying that you don't have to be feared because you don't know, it's within you. And then once I started to use the altar and put that in place, and because we celebrate Kwanzaa in Pan-African Congress movement, so having an altar wasn't strange to me, but it wasn't in my house, you know, 24/7. It came out in December, put the altar, and then it went away, you know, and you know, once I put it and said I put that together, and then, you know, the first time that I did it, I did it, and you know, and I did a ceremony doing libation or tambiko in Swahili. 6 magpies came into my back garden and were there for hours.
Oh,
and
wow.
I didn't put no food out. You know, this was, you know, and then I looked up what they mean, and magpies mean the occult or hidden knowledge. Yeah, so you're stepping into this. This was the ancestors, and they're all saying you're on the right track.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, you're on the right track. You know, it means that also the symbolism between male and female, because I was thinking my altar must symbolize male and female, and there must be balance. And it also means, and there were 6 of them, and 6 is a spiritual number for home, service, and family. This was something I was bringing into my home. It wasn't somewhere I was doing in the corner, upstairs, or in the cupboard somewhere, hiding away from my wife and children. This was in the house, on the cabinet that my son made, big and broad, and said, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
This is us. Yeah? And bang, just like that. And this is what Dada was talking about, is the reality of this, is that, you know, once you step into your power, you step towards the ancestors and they take 10 towards you. As soon as you do, as soon as you let go of the fear and just say, I'm here, I am open. And that's the thing, it's not, it's recently, I was talking to Dada Donna, who's a question, who put a question. It's understanding through a meditation that you have to let go of the values of good and bad. You have to let go. It just is, because you are the all. You are the creator, and the creator is consciousness, and the creator, there is no good or bad. It just is. The sun doesn't care what you think of it. It just shines on everyone. The moon doesn't care what you think of it. It just is. Gravity doesn't care what you are. And you are that. You are that. And once you let go of the values of this is good or that is bad, or this experience is good and this experience is bad, once you let go of that and say it just is, and everything is open to me, there's nothing not, I don't have the ability to know. My consciousness, my left brain consciousness may not be able to interpret it, but I've always known this, and it will come. Once you're given that freedom, you see your power start to come. Yeah, and it's about actually doing it. Once you do it, then you'll understand. Then you understand why we was able to build the civilizations from the Twa, the Hutu, the San, in Tarseti, in Kush, in Nubia, in Kemet, in Akan, in Yoruba, the Great Zimbabwe. Then you'll start to understand how they're able to do things that we can't do today, because they were taking it into the Akashic records, into that realm where all information is stored, the ancestral realm, and download it. But you first of all have to let go of your limitations, as Mzee Mfudishi Jutama says. You're unlimited, and you're boundless. Once you start to tap into that and understand that, then you understand how, you know, anything that is used to hold us back from our liberation is an illusion. It's us blind into
Okay.
someone else's fantasy that holds us in place.
Mhm.
Well said, Indigo
Okay,
Imani.
that's well said. Jeez. Yeah, man. So the other thing is now, there's
Yeah,
probably people watching us.
thank you for your teaching.
There's probably people watching us now and thinking, sound fascinated. I would like to try and investigate this, or where could I find more knowledge about it? Of course, there's your works. I'd like you to say a bit more about how people can actually get hold of them. You
Yeah.
know, your books and your tapes and so forth. Plus, apart from your works, is there any other, say, reading material that you would recommend for somebody looking now to, just to do some research and get more information in terms of the aspect of African spirituality?
Okay, so for Ancestral Voices, we can be contacted on our website, which is www.ancestralvoices.co.uk. And on there, you will find all of our learning resources, and which includes documentaries, books, articles, everything. But one thing that is good for anyone who is new, we do have a free 5-day video e-course that is quite expansive in terms of breaking down myself and Dalian's personal journey and how we ended up doing this work, as well as demystifying the fears that surround African spirituality, talking about the benefits of it, our research. There's a whole bunch that every single day of the video will teach you something new. So there's that in terms of what we do. We also have a recommended reading article which lists a whole range of books that we have used for our research. So instead of me listing them all here, you can just go and have a look at our website. There's quite a few. And obviously, if you want to focus on one particular tradition, then we have books that are, focused on particular areas. But anyone who generally wants to get into this, as you heard Indugu Umani just said himself, just call on your ancestors. That's how I started on this journey. Once you take that step towards them, once you do something in honor of them, whether you light a candle in their name or pour some libation in their honor, they are going to come in your life in some shape or form. Now, many people often say to me, oh, how do you know if your ancestors are talking to me? Oh, I've set up an altar and I still haven't seen anything. And I'm like, but pay attention. Because as Brother Indugumani says, that it's the subliminal, subtle changes that you'll notice. Are you aware of nature? Are you aware of the different animals and insects and things that you'll see? That's how they communicate with us. In fact, that's one of the ways that they can communicate with us. And for me, I primarily get messages through nature. So in Indugumani, I mentioned the magpies in his garden. I used to see a lot of crows. I still see crows even. I see little robin redbreasts. I may get, what else do I get? I get ladybirds. Like, they will come to you in a form that when it happens, you're like, that's strange. You pick up on it intuitively. At the time, you will know that there is more to this particular situation. You may be walking down the street and a butterfly lands on you. These are the types of ways that they can communicate. So then you have to question, what is the significance of a butterfly? Butterflies signify transformation. They go through so many different cycles in their life from the pupa stage, they go into hibernation, they come out as a caterpillar, then butterfly, so many different things. They're the transformation. So it's about being able to look at nature as a teacher and understand what is nature telling you right now. And then you will see that your reality comes alive. It's no longer about you just doing your 9-to-5 job and this mundane reality that you've been living all this time. It's about connecting to deeper aspects of yourself, and they will guide you. And this is one of the ways they will guide you, through nature. You may start seeing signs and symbols in other ways. Dreams is also another way that they will start to communicate with you. You may suddenly start to have these really vivid dreams and think, what's going on? Write them down, take a note, look at the symbolism. What are those dreams telling you? I would definitely recommend keeping a journal. But literally, once you make that connection with them, just watch your reality, just see it change. Just notice how you may walk down the street one day and you overhear a conversation that is relevant to something that you're going through in your life right now. Literally, messages come in all shapes and forms. It's about, are you aware? Are you paying attention? Meditation is not just something that you sit and do. It's an everyday experience. Every time you're outside walking, you're in meditation. So just be mindful of the different messages that can be flowing to you within that moment, because their ancestors are talking to you every day and in multiple ways, and you will become attuned to this once you start that connection with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that other ways that you can receive those messages, and not least cats and foxes, but that
Yes.
they don't have, you know, the experiences they have with the animals in their house is amazing. But you know, with numbers that appear again and again, you keep on seeing numbers appear.
Numbers are my first thing. Yeah,
exploring numerology. Exploring numerology, you know, because you know there's a mathematics and a logic to all things. Numbers are the basis, and many African systems, mathematics is the basis of that, and they all have a meaning.
Precisely.
You know, the colors that you see. Yeah,
yes,
you know, the colors that you see. You know, there's intention, like Dada says, there's an intention there. There's an intention why she's wearing white. She's not wearing white just because there's intention that why she's wearing. There's intention why I'm wearing blue. There's intention regarding the beads I'm wearing. Each one has a meaning. Each one, you know, I made these. These are the ones I made. These are the ones I made, and each one is relating to me personally and to the spiritual energies that are not outside of me, inside of me, that these are helping to resonate and bring out of me. But in essence, because we are consciousness, you don't need any of it.
That's very true too.
You don't need any of it. You know, don't you know, there's a film called Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, right? And there's and some of a certain age will know this, and those of us, you know, from the Caribbean, black men, we know, you know, about 70s and the kung fu movies. We love these kung fu movies. And there's a scene where Bruce Lee's teaching his student, and he said he asks him to do a kick, and he gets him to do it again, but he doesn't do it properly. He says, "This time with me." Right? And so he does it, and he does the kick, and he goes, "Perfect. How did that feel?" He goes, "Let me think." He said, "No, not think. Don't think. You have to feel it. You have to experience it. It's like a finger pointing at the moon. Don't look at the finger or you miss all that heavenly glory. Don't focus on the ritual and then you'll forget what you're trying to achieve." That says the intention. Yeah, because it's a tool to take you into your recognition of who you truly are, which is consciousness, which is all powerful. You are the creator. It isn't outside of you. It is in you. The ancestors are part of you, as we've been saying, and it's simple and it's complicated at the same time. But really, it's about submission and release and let go.
Yeah.
Let go of the Western way of thinking and open yourself up. You think you don't know, but you do. I assure you, as you start, it will come. Things will come to you. You know, how do you know your ancestors are speaking to you? You know, you'll be thinking of them and the words will just come. The words will just come, and you know it's not you. You know it's not you because I am not consciously thinking this. It will just come down and download to you. You know, you'll you know, with the animals. You know, how do you know it's your spirit animal? You know, the magpies are spirit animal. The crow is my spiritual animal. The seagull is my spiritual animal. Why? Because you always see them. They're always around. They're always around you for some reason. You know, these are the ones that are there to give you messages, and it's like you always are getting these messages, but it's about being aware of it. You're never not, as Dada said, you're never not being spoken to. It's about being aware. It's about being aware. Yeah, what spirituality is makes you aware of that you're always being taught to. Your consciousness is always in tune. It's just that you have layers covering it up and stopping you from experiencing it. And what we're doing is we're taking off the layers.
Indeed. And I love what you said originally when you were speaking about the fear because a lot of us do not get beyond the fear boundary. And that's what keeps a lot of us stuck. And this is why there's been such a systematic job, particularly through Hollywood and the media, and just constantly showing our spirituality as something to be feared, something negative. So many of us don't even go there. And then there are those of us who are curious, but then we're still like, I'm on the fence because I don't know if I should do it. And as Ndugu Amani says, you've got to take that plunge. And that's what I did at that time when I came into this knowledge. Even despite not being raised as a proper hardcore Christian, I had still internalized a lot of the fear. And so when it came to calling on my ancestors for the very first time, I had to kind of get over that boundary, and I needed to make that step. And once I did, and I lit a candle in their honor, and I invited them in my life, a pathway opened up for me. And here I am 10 years later, still doing this work and being an advocate for people who want to embrace their spiritual heritage. Because for me, African spirituality is not even about joining a particular religion or any kind of spiritual group or anything like that. No, it's about knowing yourself. And so I commend anybody to just kind of get over any personal boundaries. As we can see in the traditional Africa, initiation will always involve some aspect of fear. And for me, my personal initiation that I did firstly with this was getting over my own fear by lighting that candle for them. And I believe once you take that first step, then, you know, welcome to your spiritual journey.
Okay. Yeah, there's a point here by Brother Russ McCoy. Doug Russ McCoy said, a song Jerusalem utilizes African spirituality like many of our music. Many people practice but do not know. So as I said, just in many songs, many music, because you had what they call during the time of slavery, the old Negro spiritual. And if you listen to those songs sometime and the words and the feeling, you can see it's, you know, it was all that being expressed. And people still sing them and probably don't have a clue.
Absolutely. You know, our music is linked very much to our spirituality and to our consciousness. You know, the Rastafari movement was, you know, with reggae and dub and stuff like that. The vibration. Why do you think our culture is the most popular culture throughout the world? You can go anywhere you like, and you'll see Japanese people love reggae music, hip hop, and stuff like that. The African dances will go around the world, go viral. You know, with that, and the different kind of music, Afro beats, because we're using our vibration, we're using that spirituality, because our music is linked to our expression of our soul and our spirit, and it's a way for us to connect in ways that we can't even understand. You know, you put on some deep bass music to a 18-month-old, and you see that black baby start rocking and moving to that music, and it's the same thing that happens with us, and it's also what can be used against us. So we can have music that is having that beautiful bass, and it has lyrics that goes along with it that's actually holding us and trapping us away from our divine being. But when we've had that music, like roots and culture, like conscious rap, that has used that and has uplifted us, you see that not only explode with us, but other races want to jump in and finding that they're getting something from it as well. It changes the world. It changes the world. You know, we see with, for example, Bob Marley. Bob Marley, one of the greatest artists ever, because of the spirituality and the music. So yeah, we use our power sometimes, and we don't know we're using it. And that's the other thing. You know, you will manifest your greatest excitement. You know, even if the thing that you fear the most, the thing that you don't want to deal with, you will manifest, because you're that powerful. You will manifest it anyway. So that's when you have to let go of your fear and let go and be open to all experiences. And then you have the power to mold the matrix, so to speak.
Okay, so we're coming to wind up now. So in the last 5 minutes, if there's any more points people want to send in, we'll put them up. But while I'm waiting for that, I'd just like to ask Dada Verona. So African spirituality, as we says, it's something that's in, within us. From you're an African, it's coded into your DNA. It's coming down with us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you've mentioned a few things about, let yourself be open and you will actually see things around you. But say somebody just goes, right, is there a technique whereby I could tap into my DNA and more or less download, if you see, some of that knowledge? I mean, for example, if I was to pick up a pen and just said, okay, I'm going to start writing about such and such, because as it is said, because recently, though, not recently, a few years back, there was somebody, I forgot his name, but he rose in the Congo region, and apparently he just started to write, and the words just flew, and write, and he wrote books and books and books. And the book, it transpired that he wrote, and the knowledge that was in it, when it got out, I heard that the Jews went straight down to the Congo and demanded a copy, and the Pope also demanded a copy. I hope they haven't got their hands on it to this day, but you see, it just flow out. So is there any kind of technique, meditation, breathing, any kind of technique that you know of that somebody can say, I would like to just tune in? Because I know it's inside me, but how can I actually get it out? How can I actually express it? Is there any such technique that you know of?
I would say, once again, it's all about intention. I'm going to keep showing the power of mentalism. Very, very important. So there are particular techniques that people use. Some people have an altar, but I will always say that you don't have to have an altar because your mind already is your altar. But if you were to have a physical altar in your home, that is just your own personal space where you can project mental energy on what you're trying to bring forth. So that can be a space where you go to venerate your ancestors. It can be a space where you use it for your own ritual purpose to start manifesting what you want in your reality. As I mentioned before, you can simply light a candle in honor of your ancestors. There's so many ways. With us, we're spiritual beings. We should never think in limitation. There are so many things we can do. We can pray to a glass of water and drink it and embody it. As I said, they exist within your DNA. So by even doing that, you can invoke your ancestors by drinking that water and invoking those DNA cells within you that are lying dormant. You can also pour water onto a pot plant, and you can also make a prayer, do the same thing. If you don't have an altar, that could be something that you do. There are so many ways. You could even just sit down in meditation with the intention of calling your ancestors in and asking them to pass messages to you. The main point is taking some form of action, setting that intention and making that conscious effort to connect with them. Because for me personally, once I started my Know Myself journey, which was to learn about myself and my African history and my culture and started embracing who I was, that's what led me to African spirituality. Then it led me on to meeting people who would give me the advice that I'm speaking of right now. So everything always starts with that internal shift mentally, and then your outer reality will start to reflect those changes, and you will be guided. Literally, you will be guided on what to do. And it's important to listen to your intuition and that internal messaging that goes through you.
Okay. Well, as we draw to a close, I'd like to give big thanks again to Dada Verona for coming here and enlightening us with this knowledge, because I'm sure it's an area that always get a great interest, but today we have got some insight, and I'm sure what people are picking up from this. If you do want to remember the website, go to their website, and there's a wealth of information there that you can tap into. And as you said, just intuition, tap, look within,
Yes.
because you see, we do it all the time, because what they call premonition. It happens to me all the time that sometimes I would be somewhere or just in a room and I thought, what, hold on, I was here before or I dreamt that. I had a dream that told me, it could be 5 years ago, but suddenly it just came to me that I dreamt I was going to be here. And then I started looking around just to check the kind of markers. Did that really happen? And then sometimes I just go away thinking, well, it could have been coincidence, I don't know. You know, but obviously there's something going on. There's something going on. So, you know, we thank you again for your insight, and we here in the PACM, I know we have called upon Dalian several times to come to the Mars Center, which he has gladly come and is giving us so much information. And again, we thank you for the work and the dedication, because to dedicate 10 years of your life to this is no mean feat. So I just like to, that's it. I just like to let people know that this is coming from somewhere deep. So you're very privileged today, and we're very privileged to have Verona with us, who can impart that in-depth knowledge. So again, I like to say thank you for coming and participating in this program today.
Thank you to Ndugu Tahaka. It's been wonderful being on. I thank you for inviting me on today to speak, and for your support over the years. And to Ndugu Umani, I cannot stress how supportive you've been to us since you came across us only a few years ago. Just watching your spiritual journey has been very inspiring. And, you know, you say that you learn from us. I learn from you every single day. So that's that level of reciprocity in terms of how our spirituality works. And I give thanks for, you know, the love that you've shown us, and, you know, the love that you continue to show us, and the knowledge that's being shared. So we give thanks. And I thank everybody who tuned in today. I give the ancestors thanks for the powerful messages that were delivered today. And I appreciate the show and both of you for your great work.
Okay. So at this point now, I'd just like to pass over to Ndugu Umani, who will do us a pleasure of changing the energy and closing this gathering for us. So
yes, absolutely. Again, you know, Ndugu Tahaka said it perfectly. You know, thank you so much. You know, one of the things that is very key for us to do is, you know, with our ancestors, but also for those who are with us now, you know, and give them their flowers now, and give them their, and I know that with, you know, we often, you know, sometimes we take for granted what people do for us, you know, especially in our liberation movements and things like that. There's a lot of dedication, and the thing that comes very clear from Dalian and Verona is love. The love for our people, the love for, you know, for the all, and for that, and sharing that knowledge, you know, and that drive. And thank you so much, you know. And so we know it comes from a true place of peace and art, you know, and you're growing, and what you're helping to enlighten for everybody else, you know, is a great thing. And I cannot stress enough, go onto Ancestral Voices website. You won't regret it. You won't regret it. You may not understand everything that you read, but you will do, you know. Let's go into that, and it will call you, you know. Intuition will call you, you know. How many of our grandmas or mothers said, you know, I dreamt fish, you know, or this, you know, I would say this, you know, or, you know, how many times do you say to yourself, you know, I really shouldn't have done it. My spirit told me not to do that, and I did it anyway. And look what happened. You know, how many times? Those of us who do martial arts. What do you think is happening when you're doing that concentration and you put your foot through 10 tiles? That's spirituality. Do you think that, you know, when you turn your fist into something harder than steel, where do you think that's coming from? You are doing it. You've just never linked it to your own self. You've looked outside yourself and said, it's somewhere else. It's not me. No, it's you. It's your power. You know, and that's the gift of Ancestral Voices. It links you back and starts you on your journey. You know, so it's a great gateway. So yeah, just wanted to say that's, you know, that is a, you know, a true gratitude, and I'm happy to continue to work with you, and happy that what we've been able to learn, I'm able to give to pass on within the PACM, and we can start to explore that as an organization even more deeply. So, you know, there's great benefit in what's been happening. Okay, so let me share my screen. Let's see. Yes, so we're going to end, and just as Dada said, this ritual, came from meditation and guidance of intuition, and the willingness to do that and have the bravery to do that was from ancestral voices, in that sense of, you can create your own rituals, and it doesn't have to come from one tradition. You can bring it all together. The traditions are wonderful and should be followed, and if that's your path, then do that. But you don't have to feel limited. You just have to be limited. You just have to open yourself up to your own intuition, and this is something that we all can do. I do divinations. I never thought I could do that. I read the tarot. Never thought that was something that I could ever do or have any interest with. It's where spirit leads you, and that's the power. That's the power of our African spirituality. How it opens up the world to you and your spirituality. So, to end the ritual, I'm going to ring the bell, but I'm going to ask Dada Verona, is there a number that comes to mind? That just comes to mind now?
Ooh, I guess my number that has always been calling me from day one is 11, so I'm going to have to go with the number 11.
11 is my spiritual number.
Okay.
My life path number. So that is beautiful. So we will, 11 is a master number. 11 is a master number, and it means deep spiritual connection and understanding and service and a spiritual connection. So we're going to ring the chime 11 times. Going to allow that vibration to go around us, over us, and through us. Again, to have gratitude and recognition, and be thankful for the forces, the cosmic forces that we called into our presence from their realm, from the ancestors, who are always with us, but they have their own realms where they reside, and they go back to those. They're asking that we go back to those realms with our intentions, as Dada was saying, mentalism, as our intentions, and help us manifest our objectives and have a closer connection with them. So as we're doing that, we focus on that and focusing on opening our consciousness to supreme consciousness and our link with each other as we end this time of communion with each other and bring it to a close. So I'll ring it 11 times, breathe deeply, and allow the vibration to take over. Okay, I'll begin and I'll count. Moja. Mbili. Tatu. Ine. Tana. Sita. Be more present, forget about what's happened and forget where you're going. Be in the ever-present now. Saba. Nane. Tisa. Kumi. Kumina Moja. And so now, finally, again, we end on the words of power and affirmations. So please join me and just repeat after me. Nguvu zote.
Nguvu zote.
Nguvu zote.
Kwa watu wetu.
Kwa watu
Kwa
wetu.
watu wetu.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Na mapenzi ya wote.
Mapenzi ya wote.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Ni mapenzi
Ni
yetu.
mapenzi yetu.
All power to our people, and the will of the all is our will. Asanteni sana, Jamaa.
Asante sana.
Okay, asante sana, ndugu Imani. And again, asante sana to Dada Verona for being with us today. And asante sana to all the viewers who's watching us today. So until next week, we'll be back again with another interesting dynamic program. So until then, I say kwaheri to everybody.